The sun was barely a pale streak over the horizon when Diana adjusted the rifle's scope and squinted across the dry, trembling land. Every morning she came here to the ridge, where the disputed border cut through the valley like a scar. Settlers argued endlessly about where one claim ended and another began. But Diana had a simpler solution. Bullets didn't lie. Her boots crunched against the loose gravel as she loaded the last round into her rifle. The map lay on a nearby rock, worn and faded, but she didn't need it. She had memorized the terrain in detail, the winding creek that curved around the old oak, the flat mesa, perfect for a long shot, the line where the soil shifted from reddish clay to golden sand. Another day, another boundary, she muttered, half to herself, half to the wind. She crouched, aimed, and fired. The bullet tore a clean arc into the earth, a precise mark where she decreed the line should be. To some, it was madness. To Diana, it was justice. A rustle of leather and the faint jingle of spurs made her freeze. Through the haze, a figure appeared on the trail below, framed by the rising sun. A man tall, lean, with a surveyor's case strapped to his back. He moved with the certainty of someone who had walked these lands 1,000 times, measuring, plotting, correcting. Cain. Her heart ticked faster, not from fear, but anticipation. Cain was the government's surveyor, sent to enforce the official borders, to stop people like her from playing God with the land. She had heard of him before. Meticulous, relentless, impossible to persuade once he had a plan in mind. "You're trespassing," Cain called out, his voice sharp enough to cut through the wind. "And tampering with government property is a serious offense." Diana stood, keeping her rifle level but lowering it slightly, like a predator considering a challenge. "I'm making the land speak the truth," she replied, her tone steady. "Maps are words on paper. Bullets leave marks you can't ignore." Cain narrowed his eyes and took a cautious step forward, pulling a small notebook from his coat. "Truth isn't decided by aim, Miss Diana," she said, one hand still on the rifle. "Diana Cross. Miss Cross, truth is measured, not shot. Every bullet you fire destroys trust, creates chaos. I've been sent to ensure the lines are correct, and I won't." The sharp crack of another gunshot interrupted him. Dirt erupted near his feet, a whispering cloud of dust. Diana smirked, keeping her stance steady. "Lines can be fixed," she said, "but someone has to do it properly." Cain's jaw tightened. He knew arguing with her would be futile. Her aim was deadly and her confidence unwavering. Yet he couldn't retreat, not now. Not when the government's authority depended on the borders being enforced. He stepped closer, carefully studying the bullet marks she had left the day before. Each one was precise, almost artistic, a testament to her skill. "You can't redraw a nation's map with bullets," Cain said, his voice lower now, tinged with admiration he refused to show. "But I need to know why you care. Why risk everything for lines in the dirt?" Diana's eyes flicked to the valley below, where settlers argued endlessly, crops trampled, fences dismantled. She knew why. She had seen enough greed, enough injustice, to know that sometimes the law needed a sharper hand. "Because someone has to," she said simply. "And it might as well be me." The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of sagebrush and gunpowder. Cain felt a shiver run down his spine. He had faced bandits, rustlers, even the harsh wilderness itself, but never a woman with a rifle in one hand and conviction in the other. And he had a feeling this wasn't going to end with words. By midday, the valley simmered under the relentless sun. Diana crouched behind a ridge, her rifle resting on a jagged rock, eyes tracing the faint trail Cain had taken earlier. He moved deliberately, measuring angles, pacing distances, jotting notes in his leather-bound notebook. Every move he made told her he was damn good, but that didn't scare her. "Why do you keep at it?" Cain's voice carried across the ridge, even without a shout. Diana tilted her head, keeping her position hidden. Because someone has to remind the world that lines drawn by bureaucrats don't account for life on the ground, she replied, her voice calm but edged with steel. She fired another round, the bullet embedding in the trunk of a tree exactly where she had intended. The tree shivered from the impact. Cain froze. Glancing up at the mark, he shook his head. Precision isn't the same as justice. She stood, stepping into the sun, rifle lowered but ready. Sweat ran down her back, not from exertion but from the thrill of facing someone who could actually challenge her. Cain had authority, and he had knowledge. But she had something rarer: instinct. Every shot she took, every mark she left, was a line of experience she had earned the hard way. Cain adjusted his compass and started pacing again. "If you keep this up," he said slowly, "someone's bound to get hurt, or worse." Diana smiled faintly, a cold glint in her eyes. "Someone already has," she said, thinking of the farmers whose crops were ripped apart, the families who lost property in endless disputes. "And if I don't act, it'll happen again. I'm not afraid of a few bruised egos or stubborn surveyors." Cain studied her, noticing the intensity in her eyes, the steady way she held the rifle. He knew she wasn't just a sharpshooter, she was a force of nature. And forces of nature weren't easily tamed. "You're reckless," he said, "and stubborn. You know what happens when people start acting outside the law." Diana shrugged. "Then the law needs someone who isn't afraid to right it with action." She took a step forward. "I'm not doing this for me, Mr. Cain. I'm doing it for everyone who can't defend themselves." Cain's fingers brushed the edge of his notebook. He could try to lecture her, threaten her, even force her to stop. He knew it would be pointless. Diana had drawn her line, and she wasn't moving. A gust of wind swept through the valley, carrying dust and the faint scent of gunpowder. Cain squinted against it and saw the next target she had picked out: a narrow canyon, perfect for a single, clean shot. He realized with a sinking feeling that she wasn't just marking borders, she was creating them. He stepped closer, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Diana, listen to me. I can't let you." A sharp crack interrupted him. The bullet zipped past, embedding in the rock just inches from his boots. He stumbled back, startled, and looked up. Diana stood on the ridge, calm as ever, rifle smoking lightly. "Careful, Cain," she said, almost teasingly. "Lines drawn in blood hurt less than lines ignored." He swallowed, the weight of her words pressing down on him. She wasn't a criminal. She wasn't a bandit. She was something far more dangerous, someone who believed entirely in her own definition of right and wrong. And Cain realized that no amount of rules, no amount of surveying, would ever make her see the world as he did. "Then, tell me," he said, voice low, "what happens when the law finally catches up with you?" Diana's gaze didn't waver. "Then they'll see who's been holding the line all along." The canyon stretched before them, empty, silent, except for the whisper of the wind. Two people, each armed with different tools, different visions, yet bound together by a single, invisible line. And for the first time, Cain wondered not if he could stop her, but if he even wanted to. Because, somewhere under the dust and sun, between the crosshairs and the compass, a strange respect was forming, one neither of them could yet name. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the valley, turning the dirt a deep, fiery red. Diana perched atop a ridge, rifle cradled in her arms, eyes scanning the terrain below. Cain's surveying instruments glinted in the fading light as he methodically measured the land. She had watched him all afternoon, every careful step he took, every line he drew in the dust with his compass. It was almost hypnotic, how precise, how relentless he was. And almost infuriating. "Diana," Cain's voice cut through the quiet, "I can't let you keep moving the markers. You'll undo everything we've worked for." She lowered her rifle slightly, smirking at the way he gestured wildly from below, notebook flapping in the wind. "Everything you've worked for," she said, her tone mocking. "Your lines don't account for people. Mine do. Every bullet I fire is a border that protects someone. Cain shook his head. Borders are agreements, not threats. You can't just declare them with a gun. She stepped closer to the edge of the ridge, boots scraping against rock. Watch me. A sharp crack split the air. A bullet struck a wooden stake that Cain had just planted, splintering it into jagged pieces. Cain cursed, rubbing his hand over the ruined stake. "Diana," he yelled. Frustration and admiration mingling in his voice. "This isn't a game." "No," she said, her eyes scanning the valley. "It's survival." Cain looked up at her, realizing that arguing wouldn't stop her. The sun cast her silhouette in gold and orange, rifle in hand, standing firm, like some wild guardian of the land. And in that moment, he understood why she couldn't be reasoned with, because Diana Cross didn't need reason. She had her own code, one written in the earth itself. He took a cautious step forward, climbing the ridge, measuring each stride carefully. "Then, let's make a deal," he said. "I'll help you mark borders, proper ones, if you promise not to shoot indiscriminately." Diana laughed softly, a sound both sharp and melodic. "You really think I'd make a deal with a surveyor?" He paused, catching his breath, realizing he had no leverage. None. And yet, there was something magnetic about the way she moved, so confident, so untamed. He hated to admit it, but he wanted to understand her logic, to somehow guide it. "Then, we're at an impasse," Cain said quietly, tightening his grip on his notebook. "And impasses usually end badly." Diana tilted her head, rifle raised. "Sometimes," she admitted, "but sometimes they end with clarity." Before Cain could respond, a sudden crack echoed from behind him. He spun around just in time to see a bullet tear through the wooden fence separating two settler properties. Splinters flew everywhere, and Cain's stomach dropped. She wasn't just marking borders anymore. She was drawing them directly in front of him, testing him, daring him to intervene. He raced forward, ducking behind a boulder, heart hammering. "Diana, stop," he shouted, voice shaking. "You're going too far." Diana's response was a calm, steady click of her rifle's bolt. "Too far. The land is already too far gone," she said. "I'm just fixing it." The sun slipped below the horizon, leaving the valley in twilight. Dust hung heavy in the air, settling over the jagged marks she had left behind. Cain emerged from his cover, face streaked with dirt and sweat, notebook clutched tightly. He looked up at her, and, despite everything, he couldn't help but feel respect, maybe even awe for the woman who dared redraw the world with bullets. "You won't stop," he said quietly, more to himself than to her. "And you can't," she replied, voice soft but firm. "Not unless you're willing to aim as carefully as I do." The two of them stared at each other across the ridgeline, the valley between them littered with splintered stakes, bullet marks, and the invisible scars of stubborn wills. Neither would bend, and neither could retreat. And somewhere in that standoff, a dangerous understanding began to form one. Neither admitted, yet both could feel, because the line between law and justice, between order and chaos, had never been so thin. The night had fallen over the valley, painting everything in shades of black and silver. Diana crouched behind a rocky outcrop, her rifle resting across her knees. The stars overhead were cold, distant witnesses to the war she waged one bullet at a time. Cain moved cautiously below, lantern swinging from his hand, illuminating the rough terrain in brief, trembling bursts of light. He had followed her all day, tracing her marks, dodging shots, and now he knew he was closer than ever to understanding Herb, also closer than ever to danger. "Diana," Cain called, his voice echoing across the silent valley. "This ends tonight. You can't keep redrawing the borders. Someone's going to get killed." "Maybe they should," she said softly, her finger brushing the trigger. "The ones who ignore the land, the people, the rules, written on paper. Maybe a warning shot is the only language they understand." Cain stepped into the faint moonlight, hands raised, trying to appear calm but tense, as a bowstring. "I don't want to fight you," he said quietly, "but I can't let you destroy everything for the sake of what? Pride, justice." Her eyes narrowed. "It's not pride, it's protection. And if you want to understand, you'll have to follow me." Before Cain could respond, a single shot rang out. It wasn't aimed at him, but near him, a warning, a message. Dirt exploded behind him. He froze, heart hammering, realizing she had been measuring not just the land, but his reactions. "You're impossible," Cain muttered under his breath. And yet, something about her precision, her fearlessness, made him feel alive in a way he hadn't in years. "Impossible." Diana's voice floated down from the ridge, calm and amused. "I think you mean predictable. You think in lines, in measurements, in rules. But life is not so tidy." Cain gritted his teeth. "Then prove it. Tell me what you want, Diana. Tell me why you risk everything for dirt and stakes." She considered him, rifle lowered, but ready, eyes glinting in the moonlight. "Because someone has to care," she said finally. "And if I don't do it, no one else will. Maps lie, words lie, but a bullet leaves the truth in the earth." Cain swallowed, feeling the weight of her conviction. "And what happens when someone gets hurt? What happens when the law comes for you?" Diana's expression softened ever so slightly, just enough for Cain to see the humanity beneath the fierce sharpshooter. "Then I'll face it," she said. "But until that day, I have work to do." A sudden movement caught Cain's eye flicker in the shadows. He turned, thinking it was another bullet, only to see Diana shifting to a new vantage point, almost like a phantom. His pulse quickened. She wasn't just skilled, she was untouchable. Cain clenched his fists. He had come to stop her, to enforce the rules. Yet every step he took toward her only pulled him deeper into the game she had started. He realized, with both fear and admiration, that he might not be able to control her, even outmaneuver her. The night stretched on, filled with silent standoffs, careful steps, and the occasional report of a shot into the earth. Both of them knew the valley could not remain neutral forever. Sooner or later, their standoff would erupt into something neither of them could fully control. And yet, amid the tension, a strange bond formed, an unspoken understanding that each respected the other's skill. Each recognized the fire that burned in the other's heart. Diana whispered into the night, almost to herself, "Lines can be crossed, if you dare." Cain, listening from below, felt the truth of her words. And he also knew that crossing those lines might be the only way they would both survive. The night held its breath. The first rays of dawn stretched over the valley, spilling gold across the jagged landscape. Diana crouched atop the ridge, rifle poised, senses sharp. The night had left dust in her hair and sweat on her brow, but it hadn't shaken her. She knew Cain was below, moving carefully, measuring, calculating, trying to anticipate her next move. "Diana," Cain's voice rang out, firm but tired. "We can end this now. No more bullets, no more destruction. Let's finish this properly." She didn't lower her rifle. Her eyes, steady and unyielding, scanned the valley. Every stake, every bullet mark, every scar in the earth told her story. The story of land disputed, of people ignored, of justice left undone. This ends when the truth is visible. Cain, not on paper, not in ink, on the ground. Cain exhaled slowly. He had chased her across ridges, dodged her bullets, studied her every move. And now, standing in the shadow of her determination, he realized that stopping Diana wasn't about force, it was about understanding. But understanding didn't come easy, and neither did trust. "Then, show me," he said quietly. "Show me the truth, you see." Diana's lips curved into a small, fierce smile. "Watch closely," she said. One shot rang out, precise, echoing across the valley. The bullet struck a jagged rock at the edge of a settler's fence. Another followed, marking a line from the creek to the mesa. Cain watched in awe as the valley slowly became a living map, a patchwork of borders drawn by her hands and her aim. "You're incredible," he muttered, though he said it more to himself than to her. "I'm not doing this for praise," Diana replied. Her gaze softened slightly as she lowered the rifle, letting Cain step closer. "I'm doing this for the people who can't fight for themselves." Cain extended a hand cautiously. "Then let's finish it together." For the first time, Diana felt the weight of partnership instead of confrontation. She nodded, letting him approach, realizing that the valley didn't need enemies, it needed allies. Together, they walked the ridges and valleys, measuring, marking, correcting, combining his precision with her instinct. Bullets and compasses became tools of cooperation instead of conflict. By midday, the disputed border had been redrawn, clear, fair, and respected by those who had claimed the land for decades. They stopped atop the final ridge, overlooking the valley below. The land stretched wide and open, sunlight bouncing off the red clay and golden sand. For the first time, Diana allowed herself to relax. Rifle slung over her shoulder. Cain adjusted his compass, satisfied with their work. "Looks like the line's finally done," he said quietly. Diana smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunrise. "It's more than a line. It's balance." Cain nodded. "And maybe respect." They shared a long, silent moment, both aware that the valley had tested them, challenged them, and ultimately changed them. Diana had fired bullets to draw justice. Cain had measured to enforce order, but together they had found a new way. Diana glanced at him, a spark of mischief returning to her eyes. "You know," she said softly, "I could get used to having a surveyor who doesn't flinch at a bullet mark." Cain laughed, a sound full of relief and admiration. "And I could get used to a sharpshooter who actually listens." Sometimes the valley stretched before them, quiet, still, and finally at peace. And, as they turned to leave, Diana whispered, almost to the wind, "Lines can be crossed." If you dare, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more Western stories.